talks when we can. So I'm Ken Newbo. I'm the health transformation specialist, functional nutrition practitioner, and holistic health and life coach. I help people move through transformations in their life, particularly around one of the hardest pieces of their life, which is around getting their nutritional balance and their health together over a period of time, and putting in the habits and all the good things that we need to do outside of the technical things that we need to do to get someone back in proper balance in their life. So today we're going to talk about a near and dear subject to me, which is on the topic of sugar. And this is, like I said, this is not your average sugar talk. Maybe you need some of the basics, and we'll cover some of those, but we're going to dive a little deeper into some of the ailments that chain reactions happen in the body to cause maybe some of the symptoms that you're feeling and you may not be quite admitting to or acknowledging where the source of the pain is coming from, whether it be alcohol, candy, sugar, breads, crackers, processed foods, even fruit, depending on the level of imbalance that's going on in your body. So Heather, before I get started here, you're such a great host. You always come up with really cool questions. What's one of the top 3 things you absolutely want to take away today about sugar?
I think people have a misconception of what sugars actually are. I've been kind of researching a little bit, and for those of you that are just coming on, I just want to say again, welcome. We're so excited to have you with us. I'm Heather from Give Me Some Green. I didn't record the intro, but in short, this is our coffee talk sessions, and we're grateful to be bringing them back via Zoom. So welcome to the call. We're very grateful to have each and every one of you here. So when it comes to sugar, for me, the people that I've been talking to since we started scheduling these calls is I've been asking them, what is sugar to you? A lot of people come back with it is, you know, your candy bar, your soda pops. People don't realize that sugars are in your bread. Sugars are in your pasta. We all know that fruits are sweet, but many people don't view fruit as sugar. So I think today a good takeaway is really outlining everything you eat has some level of sugar, but what level is the area where it becomes toxic for your body, and what level is it that it becomes healthy for your body, and what's the difference between a healthy sugar and a bad sugar? So those are some of the questions and things I'm hoping to take away from our call today.
Well, that's good. I think those are some very good points. We can cover those first, kind of jump into those right away. I love the fact when, you know, people start to open up and realize that they have a sugar issue. So most people that I meet, even, you know, within my business, tend to think, you know, they may or may not have a sugar problem because they don't like candy or they don't eat sweets, for example. But like you were saying, you know, there's tons of glucose, which is a form of sugar, like the main source of sugar that we're leveraging in the body. That is absolutely part of the whole sugar paradigm. So whether that's from pasta, breads, milk, which also has its own sugars like lactose, cheeses, you know, there's a lot of sugars that are hidden from you, but just because we're really not looking for them or paying attention to what they actually are or where they are located. And so when some people start trying to remove sugars from their nutrition eating regimen, they often have a hard time because they're not really grasping all of them. And so they may be trying to cut strictly down, maybe from an addiction standpoint, and trying to get better at managing their sugar, but they end up cutting away from the sweet things, which was easy, but not identifying the things that aren't so sweet to the palate right off the bat, but then convert to sugar once it's in the body. And then they start picking up more of those, right? So the addiction hasn't shifted, it just shifts from one source to another, and it gravitates, has a larger pool to them. So now they're taking in more dairy, they're taking in more breads, they're taking in more pasta. I see this happen with lots of different styles of eating out there when people are making a shift and they recognize, I have to come off of sugar. So we absolutely have to recognize that, you know, we have those sugars that exist, you know, right there within those types of foods. If you're really trying to, you know, curtail an addiction or some other issues that you're having in the body from sugar, which we'll talk about today, you may be looking at eliminating things like beets, carrots, potatoes, corn.
No.
Yeah, I mean, you literally could, depending on the level of severity that you're dealing with in your body. And then there's this exchange that a lot of people make, like, let's pick on paleo, for example, right? When I first started doing
You said
paleo,
something a second ago. I want
yeah,
to just pull out real quick before I forget. You said something about milk and sugar and lactose, and you frequently hear about people being lactose intolerant. Are you suggesting that they're sugar intolerant?
well, I'm not exactly saying that they're sugar intolerant. I'm just saying that that is definitely a form of sugar that they may not realize is there. What most people tend to be, I think, in terms of the intolerance coming from milk, may be more of the proteins that they're taking in, like casein protein, which can be
Okay.
pretty inflammatory to the body. Um, but no, I'm not saying that that's an exchange, a direct exchange in that sense. No.
Okay. Okay.
But let's think about let's take paleo, which is a pretty popular, pretty healthy for most people. I kind of call that a middle of the road opportunity for people to kind of come back to center and get on a really whole foods diet without, really pushing away a ton of different foods outside of grains and beans, and of course processed foods. With every diet gets rid of processed foods, right? So even looking into a diet of that nature where, okay, we could have paleo, we could be eating meats, cheeses, you could even take in some starches. And this is where we kind of get into starch as being another form of sugar that we have to recognize, which is why I brought up carrots, which is why I brought up beets, which is why I brought up corn. These all have starches in them that convert to sugar in the body. You could even take that down the road. I know not paleo, but let's talk about rice. Rice in itself will too give us that benefit, especially white rice. It doesn't have the outside fibrous bran that brown rice does to slow down the metabolism of the sugar, when we take it in.
I don't think
So
we think of rice as sugar. Like
no, nobody
I've
does.
never thought that rice would be a sugar. So
Yeah.
that's very interesting to think about. And I think that's one of the things that I would like myself and others to take away from this call is there's so many hidden sugars in what we eat that we need to look at everything as a whole, not just
Hmm.
you can't have, I mean, because sometimes, and correct me if I'm wrong, but just what I've learned from you, that sometimes that small piece of dark chocolate is better for you than that meal that you actually thought was amazing for you.
Well, yeah, I mean, it definitely, there could be some credence to that for sure, depending on what they're eating.
Hmm.
Um, but, dark chocolate will get you only so far. You got to have some other things, especially if you're eating the good dark chocolate, 85% or above. I think 85 to 92% is, if you're going to eat chocolate, that's probably where you need to be, because it'll probably give you that satisfaction that you're looking for. Then you can also pick up some of the anti-inflammatory effects of polyphenols that are there that can help improve your heart function and cardiovascular system. And it can ultimately just kind of help curb that craving, right? That's really what we want. We just want to
So let's talk
satisfy.
about that. Let's talk
Yeah.
about the craving. So
Woo.
the whole world has been home for, what are we pushing now? 8 weeks?
Something like that. Yeah.
Like 7, 8 weeks. Um,
Remember anymore.
so at this point, um, now that the whole world has put on 400 freaking pounds because we've all been home and eating everything. I cannot tell you how many people I talk to, and every time I talk to them, even if it's 6 times a day, they're like, yeah. And it's not just food. It's how many cups of coffee are you having now that the coffee pot's 5 feet away? And it's free
Yeah.
because it's not Starbucks. Or how many times are you just like, one more blow pop or one more ice cream or candy? Candy is
Mhm.
another big one that people have been going up on. So now that the entire world is going to have a massive sugar addiction and not even realize it, what are some of the symptoms of sugar addiction that people can look to and say, hey, you know what, maybe this is something I need to dive deeper into?
Well, let's check this out, because addiction is a circle, right? And you just have to pick what part of the wheel you want to jump on to go. Is it chicken before the egg,
Hey,
right?
Chuck.
So, ultimately, when we're thinking about why am I craving sugar, it could be because of something is already going on, or it could be just because sugar has finally gravitated to a level within your body and within your being and within your habits that it's driving an outcome of symptoms that you don't like. So one of the first ones to think about that might get you to even crave sugar is sleep deprivation. Not sleeping enough. So simply being tired and not getting the proper amounts of serotonin developed to actually get to sleep could be causing the need or the desire for more sugar. It's just because your hunger hormone is kicking in because your hormones are off balance since you're not sleeping. So when you wake, you're trying to pick up, you're trying to get that energy, you're trying to make the brain happy, to make all the decisions that you have to make through the day. So you don't have that energy. So what do? You go for that sugar, right? It's
And we do
quick
it
energy.
unconsciously.
Yeah, your body's very, very smart. Your brain is also very smart. And so it's going to make demands of you, right? It's going, hey, I didn't really sleep enough last night. I'm still tired. So your defenses are already down, and the body loves to burn sugar because it's an easy, fast form of energy. I call it cheap energy. It's just cheap, dirty fuel, right? If I can get this, I can get the sugar.
It's
it
like
burns
5-hour
hot.
energy.
Yeah, it burns hot, it burns fast, and then you need more. It burns hot, it burns fast, and then you need more. And as you're doing that throughout the day, so we could just take, a standard American diet kind of opportunity here and say, all right, so you're waking up 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, you go have the coffee with the creamer and the sugar, boom, you've already set up your day to be on a roller coaster of, sugar ups and downs, right? So some of my hypoglycemic people out there, sorry about the motorcycles in the background. I live in Monroe. We get kind of hype out here.
You're fine. So I just want let me address that for one quick second.
Sure.
So just to confirm, not all coffee needs to be sugary. So I know a lot of people are scared to death to have just coffee without sugar. I know when I first started going through a detox program and detoxifying from sugar, okay, because it is, you hear people say sugar's the biggest killer. Sugar is the biggest killer. So
straight up.
And you've known this, and we've talked about this a couple times, that sugar is just as addictive as heroin and cocaine.
More.
So for me, I mean, as I'm not drinking coffee, I'm drinking chai right now, but it was really hard for me to have chai without honey, without all of these sweeteners, or even coffee. I love flavored creamer. I love flavored creamer like I love my children.
Yes.
It is like, I would, you know what? I buy it Christmas gifts. I buy it new coffee mugs to put it in. I buy it new coffee to put the creamer in. So I love my creamer. So getting away from that was really difficult. And getting away from dairy for me was difficult. So I went from dairy milk to almond milk, sweetened vanilla, to unsweetened vanilla, to unsweetened, just now I can't even palate sweetened vanilla almond milk. I just can't even I can't palate it anymore. But it's a transition. So when people are talking about coffee, because I'm going to venture to say that 90% of the people that watch this, that is their first and number one crutch. And if it's anything that you've taught me and we've talked about in the past, find one thing to shift, just one thing, and
start with one.
Start with one. So what is your suggestion for the very heavy coffee drinking Americans to try to skinny down and take some of that sugar off of the very first drink that they have in the morning?
I mean, honestly, the first methodology is replace, right?
Okay.
So thinking about gradually moving, towards something is, what can you absolutely go without, and how can you replace the palate of sweetness and gently move off? And I would say you probably want to look at a sugar alternative like stevia or monk fruit powder. Now, stevia is very hard to find that does not contain other sugar in it, because you've been hoodwinked in the market. So when you go to the actual grocery store and look at the ingredients of most stevia. In fact, if it's white, it's garbage. Stevia is like a mint plant. It's green and it's supposed to stay green. I grow it myself. So if you're getting stevia and it's already in a liquid form or it's white, it's sugar. There is sugar in it in the way that it was processed. It probably also has some level of contaminants to get it white as well. So these are things you're going to have to contend with. So if you want stevia, I can recommend a brand called Mayan. Anyway, it's called Mayan, M-A-Y-A-N, Mayan. You can find it on Amazon. It's green, it's organic. I think Frontier Spices makes one too that's organic. That's green. The key is it needs to be green and the ingredients need to say organic stevia, and that's it. So when you go to the grocery store and you grab that big, nice white bag of raw stevia, right? Look at the ingredients. It'll have another form of sugar in there called dextrose 9 times out of 10. Okay, so that's just another form of sugar. So they're going to keep that sugar dollar. Look, the food industry wants you to move your sugar dollar from one place to another because they know you're weak and they know as many places that they can put sugar in it, they can keep you hooked on their processed foods. All right. So you got to get into a mindset. This is also very important about making the shift. If you do not want to be addicted to sugar anymore and you need to reduce this in your life in order to better your health, then you've got to get the right mindset about that these industries are out to get you.
Right.
They want to get you. They want to hold on to you. They want to keep you hooked. They are pushers. Okay.
You know, and that's hard for people to hear. I mean,
yeah,
there's a lot of people listening that they're like, I don't know if I want to believe that, but the reality is have you ever heard, and I'm speaking to everyone out there, have you ever heard of an industry being punished because of their poor marketing techniques or their poaching techniques? It's just salesmen that have been caught.
Yeah.
The food industry are salesmen that just haven't been caught yet. And the reality is they make things to trigger. Okay, so who was I talking to recently? I was talking to a food expert, and they were saying that there are ingredients in pizza that force you to crave soda, alcohol. They want you to create carbonation because the carbonation mixed with the pizza crust makes you want more pizza.
Well, so let's go a level deeper. It gets you high.
Excuse me?
It gets you high.
Pizza?
Pizza gets you high.
I don't think I'm eating pizza correctly then.
Sugar gets you high. Right? And I've talked to an owner of a pizzeria, and I was like, so what's your secret to everybody loving your pizza? He goes, cheese, more cheese, more and more cheese than anybody else around. Why? Because cheese is highly addictive. Okay.
Really?
So there's 2 strains of morphine that naturally exist in cheese. That's natural. It's meant to be there. It's just like if a woman makes this too through her breast milk. This makes your baby very happy and sedated when they drink the breast milk. It's also why they fall asleep. They're happy. They're happy and high. Okay. This is how God made it for us to be able to latch on. That baby wants to have that milk because it's nourishing. It feels good. It tastes good. It gets them happy. It makes them sleep. Right. How many people have seen a baby just knocked out on a breast? You know, it's because it's by design. Everything in milk is about growing that being, and sugar has been placed there with these other chemicals together, right? A little bit of sugar, a little bit of some morphine strains that are going to make this a desirable thing to do. So as you're pounding the cheese, you're getting high. We all get high on sugar, no matter what source. We love it. It makes us happy. It appeals to the same receptors as cocaine and crack, in the brain.
All right. So let me ask you this: if it produces a euphoric experience for our cellular level, obviously mentally you're not high, but cellularly you're on this high. What is cow's milk doing when we drink that? What is cow's milk doing when we're drinking that?
Oh, cow's milk makes people happy. If you're drinking real whole milk, now that skim stuff, I don't know what that is. I think that's water with, I don't know, chalk in it or something. But, the sugar's doing the same thing. I don't care where it comes from. right? If you're eating a piece of fruit, if you're grabbing on milk, if you're having a cookie, it's just about the load. How much load are you taking in that particular serving? Why do milk and cookies go so great together? They're amazing.
Sugar
right?
on sugar.
It's sugar on sugar, baby. Right? So,
Okay.
And it's like, I'm not poking at anybody, right? I like cookies.
It's just science.
I like sugar too. It's hard not to, especially when you've been raised in a society that overdoes it in every opportunity. I mean, I got kids. I'm kind of liking the break from them going to school, getting shoved candy in their face for every little thing they do as part of the reward systems that are out there, right?
Oh, that's a bone. That's a bone I don't want to pick right now, but
I'm picking it. Pick that bone. Because
so we had so many of us
as well. The reason so many of us have this problem is because we were given so much sugar as children. Period. Now we're adults and we're hooked and we can't figure out how to get off of it, and it's ruining our cardiovascular system. It's jacking up our brain. It's ruining our hormones. It's causing us to have fatty liver, whether you're a drinker or not. Okay, and you can't seem to get the weight off. You're dealing with high blood pressure.
All right, so let's address that for a second. So we're talking about kids, right? And yes, unfortunately, our school systems do encourage sugar addictions, even though they plan not to, because my sons come home with candy treats, and I've texted the teacher, I'm like, anything but candy, like anything, crayons.
You have any other reward.
Kids can burn it off faster, and you and I have shared that, but there's more obese children now than there ever have been. But does sugar build up in your system? Because it seems like, just through my time working with clients and working with patients over the past decade plus, is that as we get older, it's almost like our bodies store it and turn it into something else, and then we become much more susceptible to how it reacts. Is there some kind of pattern with age? Does sugar build up in your body?
Oh my gosh. Well, just on the subject, not necessarily build up, but affect.
Okay.
Right. So there's so many effects depending on what it is that we want to actually focus on, with sugar, that can just build chronic conditions, to start with inflammation. Right. So think about your average diet. Let's talk, don't want to pick on diabetics out there, but let's just talk about the condition of where all the sugar is. Once you're taking in so much sugar that your cells say, I don't want any more, right? Stop showing up here. I don't want any more, right? So we're creating this insulin response, and insulin is what is needed in order to escort sugar into the cell, right? So the insulin gets produced, gets pushed into the blood when you eat something that is also, of sugar substance. Boom, insulin gets produced even more. It wants to attach to the glucose, escort it to the cell and go, hey, I've got some sugar energy for you, cell. And after a while, when the cells are saturated, they just go, hey, I don't want any more. So now you're dealing with this high level of sugar running through your veins. It's not getting attached anywhere. So eventually the body has to treat it as a toxin and put it in a fat store. Okay, so now it becomes fat. All right. This is the biggest issue with most people right now in terms of their overall health. If you just take this one part of your life and gain some control and implement some steps to master sugar, you're going to feel better in a lot of ways. It might take you a couple of years for some things just to completely dissipate, but a lot of things will come back into balance in the body just by you getting in control of sugar at a maximum level. It's like one of the best things you could tell anyone to do is start there, right? Because this is why we get so derailed with our health goals in the first place, is because we can't break the addictive patterns to sugar.
But I think that's because, like I said before, people don't understand all the things that sugar are in. So based off of that, what can we, I want to make sure that everyone that listens to this has a huge takeaway on how they can use what they learn on this call and apply it to their lives and start seeing some differences. So in the mornings. We talked about substitution. Okay. So going through the day, I mean, everyone knows what manufactured sugar is. We all know what white sugar looks like. We all know that candy soda pop, you know, we know this, the quote unquote staple sugars, but those hidden sugars, how do we replace cheese on pizza? How do we, you know, like,
well, for some, I mean, this is America. For some people, you go, what are you talking about? So let's just remember that the whole pizza is sugar. It's like, okay, so you've got the cheese, that's sugar. You've got the crust, that's sugar, right? Because that's the carbohydrate, right? That's going to convert into glucose. That's the flour, right? You've probably got some processed meats sliced on top. They all have sugar in them. So salami, pastrami, you know, pepperoni.
Okay. Uncover that for me. How does processed meat have sugar?
Because that's what
I mean. Have sugar.
Yeah, they put the sugar in there. It's all there. Most of your pepperonis also have some form of wheat in them too these days. So unless you're buying like really high quality stuff and looking for these ingredients, because most people don't read the ingredients of pepperoni, right? If you're caring about this and you're trying to identify where all the outliers are, the first thing is, if you're eating processed foods, meaning that they're not whole foods, they're not actual fruits and vegetables and meats, nuts, seeds, all that good stuff, you've got to read. And as soon as you look at the actual ingredients and not just the front of the box or the bag that says the lies that this is amazing stuff, you know, everybody thinks things are amazing if it tastes good. But the number one taste good factor is sugar. Next is salt. And then they kind of play with the same receptors in the brain and they feed off of each other, bouncing you back and forth between salty and sweet. And if you can get both at the same time,
the new craze,
jump all
right?
in on that too, right?
Sea salt chocolate, the new craze. Combining the two, it's like a double whammy effect. So real quick, just everyone out there, if any of you have any questions, please feel free to chime in the chat and we'll absolutely address them. This is not a just Ken and Heather talk. This is a coffee talk. So
yeah, pop a question.
Anything you have questions about, any interactions you have questions about, please feel free to ask. And even after this Zoom call is around and you're watching this at a later date, please feel free to message us questions and we'll make sure to get those answers back to you. So Chuck comes back and he wants to know fruit sugars versus other types of sugars. So let's shift.
Yeah, so what's interesting about fruit sugar is fruit sugar is handled differently than most all the other sugars that you see in the body because it doesn't. So there's a different form of sugar, not glucose, but fructose, right? That comes through fruit. And what makes that pretty interesting is that fructose does not require insulin in order to enter the cell. So the insulin spike from sugar is typically not as long, depending on the individual's health. And it's also a very good form of, it's a very good alternative food for someone trying to get off of their candy, get off of the other sugars as a transitional food. And then you have to look at which particular fruits do you want to take in. So normally I would recommend berries because they're high flavor. They give the illusion of sweetness, but they really don't have a lot of sugar in them, right? High water content, most fruit has at least 80% or more aqueous solution or water in it. So that makes it fast moving through the body. Yes, Chuck, put strawberries in your coffee. That's gonna feel really good on your gut. I promise not. But it's definitely a transitional food. You don't have to worry as much about the insulin spike, although it depends on the individual. So I just don't want to put a blanket statement out there. Everybody has to test and measure their own thing. Melons can also
I'm going to go back to Chuck. Chuck, I've put blueberry juice in my coffee. And when I was trying to replace sugar at one point, I would take blueberries and literally put them in a press, like a garlic press, and press out the juice and put that in my coffee just to add a little sweet. You've never had blueberry coffee? Dude, I told you my love with creamer, right?
Yes.
But it actually, it provided just enough concentrated sweetness. And that was one of the things that helped me stop putting sugar in my coffee.
I mean, come on, man. There's just not a lot of coffee drinkers in the world. There's a lot of sugar and cream drinkers in the world.
Okay, fair enough. No, you're right. You're right. Coffee drinkers would constitute people that drink coffee black. And you're right.
Yeah.
There's very few of them. I took a little coffee with my cream.
Most people can't even tolerate it. And you got to remember, why is the milk there? The milk is to make coffee more easy for people with acidity, that don't like the taste of the acidity. So the calcium in the actual creamer or the milk is what neutralizes the acidity in the coffee in the first place. Then you got the underlying sugar component. Then you add a little more sugar to it, and now you've got yourself a liquid donut. And that's what most people want in the morning. They want a kick because they didn't sleep well, because they stood up late, they got their cycles off, the hormonal cycles have triggered the response. The body wakes up and goes, I want quick energy. The brain wants it too. You give into it, and now you set up your pattern for the rest of the day, right? So you're going to be spiking all over the place. So you start with a cup of coffee, then you end up with a muffin. Next thing you know, you're having a sandwich at lunch with cheese, processed meat, wheat buns or bread or what have you.
Sugar
and it kind of
buns.
just goes on for the rest of the day. So you just kind of keep feeding into this, and you never really get a chance to recover from it.
So let's talk about that. It seems to me that, and this is just my personal pattern, if someone has a different one, please chime in, but my sugar cravings are usually first thing in the morning, and then at night it becomes ravenous. My kids are very lucky that they're not made from chocolate, because I would have eaten them and they would be dead by now.
Yeah, all that stress, right? So, some of the things about, what drives us, to that train of taking in sugar and wanting more and more of it. Like I said, is it the chicken or the egg? So in that sense, is it the stress that drives the want for sugar, or is
the sugar that drives the stress?
Yeah, so they kind of start to feed off of each other. They really do. After some time, they're actually, that's why you have to have a significant pattern interrupt. Okay, so if you do really want to break this addiction, all right, because let's say you've been trying to lose weight, you're never going to lose weight until you get control of this. Not for life. You're going to keep bouncing back to the same thing until you get mastery over
yo-yo dieting, right?
If you have mastery over sugar and flour, your whole life is going to be easier to manage in terms of maintaining your wins when you are in any type of health transformation journey or weight loss journey or whatever fitness journey. Until you have that in lock, you're going to have issues. You're going to constantly fall back. You're going to bust your energy down, because it does have a diminishing return. So a lot of people have even been known to go into states of depression because of links to sugar.
So how do we, what are some good first steps? So we talked about replacement. So in the morning, we can, in the coffee is a big one in the United States. So replacing the sugar in your coffee or the creamer in your coffee with, and I know that we've talked about this before, but replacing creamer with almond milk has a little bit less sugar, but it's still, we're not taking no sugar, okay? We're just choosing the lesser of the two evils, because everything does have sugar. So doing some replacements like an almond milk or a cashew milk could be better because of the animal proteins missing. Or monk
what about
fruits.
coconut? What about coconut milk?
That's
coconut
another great option,
because it's got a lot of fat in it, right?
And then we talked about in the evening, instead of diving for that piece of chocolate or diving for that ice cream, perhaps having some fruit. And if you want ice cream, blend your fruit, throw it in the freezer with coconut milk if you want it creamy, and then you can still have that popsicle, but it's solid fruit versus being a sugar-induced coma. But what about some of those things like during the day that we can just pay attention to really help us make that shift? Like, it's because this is a really hard addiction to break.
Here's one, right? Yeah, Chuck, take a look at that Subway guy. He's not that healthy looking of a dude. He's kind of gross looking.
No, he's not.
I wouldn't say he's a pillar of health at all, my friend. But here's one of the first things that really drives the sugar train: snacking.
Okay.
The multiple times throughout the day that you're constantly taking in foods, especially if they are not whole foods, just constantly having the body create a spike of insulin, increasing that in the blood for a period of time just by having so many so much grazing throughout the day, right? So one of the best ways to kind of calm down a sugar addiction is to have real meals. Like have a meal and get satiated of some really good food that has good protein amount and fat, because those will help satiety, right? So if I've got a little more satiety going on, then I can help break this pattern of desire to want something to eat, right? So many meals, it depends on the individual. I can't quite pronounce your name, Trulia Gemma, I believe, but
Truly a gem. That's her.
Trulia Gem. I love
Yeah.
that. So Trulia Gem, that's a beautiful name. I hope that's your real name and not just a call sign. That's cool. But Trulia Gem, it depends on the individual. So like there's different types of metabolic types where I would recommend that they eat small meals throughout the day due to their type of metabolism or what type of issues they may be having with their adrenals and thyroid in terms of how they're able to manage stress and some of the other nutritional factors that come into play to help them. But for some people, having a lot of meals a day makes it worse.
Okay,
so really
let's unpack that. So
yeah.
When I first was diagnosed with a thyroid issue, and this was years ago, the doctor's like, you need to have a bunch of mini meals. And when I would do and when it was 5 meals, okay, just like she said, it was 5 meals a day. It was like a big one, a small one, a big one, a small one, a big one, a small one. I was starving all day long. Even though I was eating all day long, I was starving. When I switched and I started looking at like the tiny but full kind of recommendations where you have a lot of fruit in the morning, you load your day up with some like raw foods. At one point I was having quinoa oatmeal in the morning, which by the way is my favorite thing and I miss it desperately. But when I would have that nice breakfast in the morning, I found I didn't graze. The next thing you know, it was 2 o'clock. I'm like, crap, I missed lunch. And I wasn't even hungry at all. So I think the best way for people without working with a coach, because not everyone has the luxury of doing that. So if you're curious, if you're the right kind of person for 5 mini meals a day or 3 big meals with a small snack, experiment with your body for a couple days.
You have to. Yeah, you can't trust any professional to nail it. They just don't know you. You know you better than anyone else. It's like when I'm working with anyone, just like, you know, Heather, it's a partnership.
It
right?
is. Yeah.
It's about measuring. It's about feedback, biofeedback from the actual client that I'm working with as well, to make sure that we're on the right track, because something that works in the beginning may not work at the end. So depending on where you're starting and what kind of conditions that you have in relationship to sugar, and sugar is a big impact, you might be able to start off with 3 meals a day. You might be able to go to 5. You might be able to go to 2, depending on who you are. You might naturally not want to eat until 12 or 1 o'clock. And so maybe you can start working in some intermittent fasting. But what really matters after intermittent fasting is what you eat, right? So the real work comes after you stop fasting and decide what it is that you're going to put in your body that's going to allow you to be the most successful, to get all the benefits from the fast itself. Because a lot of people completely negate all the stuff that they do in their fast, because when they break their fast, they lose their minds. They lose their minds. I was this guy. I mean, 10 years ago when I first started fasting, and so I started with the 16-8. I was following Berkman. He was the guy I initially started learning intermittent fasting from back in the day, before it was super, super popular like it is now. And 16-8 did not work for me. I would fast for 16 hours and I would be out of control eating, because I did not have any understanding of sugar, carbohydrates, and how they affected my blood sugar. I was hypoglycemic. I have been hypoglycemic my whole life before we even termed the word hangry. Ask any of my old military friends that I used to roll with back in the day. I would fight you if you didn't pull over the car to eat. I swear to God, when I said I was hungry, I was so serious, because my brain was going completely crazy and my blood sugar was dropping like crazy. I felt horrible. And so this contributed to migraines. This contributed to other MS issues that I had that I grew into. What's that?
So intermittent fasting, and it's chai, Chuck. It's not coffee. It's chai tea. I'm not allowed to have coffee right now.
Oh.
But yeah, he's picking on me. But let's talk about intermittent fasting, because I think today it's so, even though social media is amazing and we have these platforms like this, which we're very blessed to have, there's so many keywords just kind of thrown out there.
Yes.
Please describe what is intermittent fasting, so that people truly understand, and why is that a valuable tool to use as you navigate your health?
Oh, wow. So intermittent fasting, all that really means is you're going to go an extended period of time without eating. Most people do it. I think anything over 12 hours is truly considered more of an intermittent fast versus 8 hours, right? I just don't think your body quite has enough time to really get into the cycles of the benefits that fasting in
So
general can
how long
offer.
do you do that? So I know people get confused, like, well, I intermittent fasted today. It's not one day. It's a lifestyle for a period of time, correct? Like, so you're going to intermittent fast for a week, a month, you can't
Well,
just do it for a day. That's
well, you
called not
can.
eating, okay?
Wait. You actually can. So there's a lot of different methods to intermittent fasting depending
Okay.
on what kind of benefits you're trying to achieve, who you are, male or female, where you are in your hormonals, your hormonal disposition, especially as a woman that's maybe over 35 or had kids. There's a lot of things that can play into how you fast, because every pattern doesn't work for everyone, and there's certain patterns that are way more beneficial than others depending on what it is that you're trying to solve. So let's say that we are just trying to solve our addictive pattern to sugar. Intermittent fasting can have a good play at that, if we're also breaking that fast with foods that are gonna keep us in a low insulin state. If we're
And what's
not
that?
doing that, so that's sticking to the proteins, sticking to the greens, sticking to nuts, seeds. If you can tolerate all these foods, okay, having very low, basically no contact with pastas and processed carbohydrates in that sense, because all of those are going to spike you right back up. So the last thing you would want to happen is you go fast for 16 hours, 18 hours. I fast typically 20 to 22 hours daily for the most part before I eat. Now, I've been doing this for years, so this isn't new for me.
So
My
you eat
body's well
once a day?
adapted to it. Pretty much. I typically eat between 2 hours out of the day or 4 hours out of the day.
I think I might love food too much to do that.
Well, it's okay. And you can love food. I'm not saying that's the way for everybody. It's a way that works for me. It's also just because I don't actually like eating all day long. I don't like wasting time on food all day. Some people,
Okay.
I'm not recommending that for
But you
everyone.
trained
You got to find
yourself.
your path.
Like, this is a lifestyle that you've created over time. So for those of you watching, we're not expecting you to do this. Please don't. As a matter of fact, please don't do this. Like, you need to figure out what's going on with your body. And this brings me to a really good comment, and I feel like a teacher right now, so I apologize. But seriously, journal what you eat and how you feel from it. It is eye-opening when you actually put pen to paper or finger to phone, whichever works best for you. But when you outline, I had this today, and if you start feeling like crap, write down, I feel like crap. Doesn't matter why. And then when you eat lunch, but if you keep track and you look back and you think about those moments that you were starving, think about the moments that you were bitchy, think about the moments you felt good, you can directly correlate that with the foods you're eating. And it goes back to PBS. I think every state in the world, so no matter where you're watching from, has PBS. You are what you eat, quite literally. So
we got to get there. We got to get there for real. And remember, everybody is at a different place, right? So like I said, this is general information. Don't take this as medical advice. I'm not a doctor. You gotta go do your work. You gotta do some research. You gotta try some things. You can gather information. You may even work with a professional for a period of time to really kind of drill down and do all this extra stuff that you really need in terms of understanding how things are affecting you, why you are craving so much for certain things, what other systematic things have gone wrong due to the way that you've been eating, right? So maybe you have
talk about that.
Yeah.
Systematically.
Let's just go through a few facts on cardiovascular health and sugar. Okay?
Yeah, that's what I was just about to say. Like, how does sugar affect the metabolic functioning of your body?
Well, I'm going to talk about cardiovascular health first, and then we'll get into more of this. But this all links together, which is the best part. So let's talk about 21% of your calories, this is easy for an American to do. 21% of the calories that come from sugar in your diet will give you a double opportunity. It increases your potential for cardiovascular disease 50%. Okay? We obviously know that this is linked to heart disease, obesity, inflammation, and at a cellular level, right? Elevated triglycerides. So now people that are worried about their cholesterol not being in the right balance, you could point here to sugar, right? Overall blood sugar is high and blood pressure can raise, all from this one piece right here. Let's just take it a step further, right? So not only can that number of 20% of your calories get you in the risk factor, but let's see here, you have a 38% higher risk of dying from heart disease compared to those who are only at risk of about 8%. Now we know this is like the highest marker in our country, right? Probably in the world right now in terms of our health disposition is cardiovascular disease, right? So if we've got a direct connect, you don't have to get fancy with it. We got a direct connect here between sugar and cardiovascular disease. So if you're able to manage this, you will lower your potentiality, 50+%, and even being in that category for cardiovascular disease, or 38% in comparison to others who don't, right? So this oxidative stress, which means at the cellular level, which you were trying to hint to earlier, right? What are we getting there? What is oxidative stress? Oxidative stress is lack of oxygen, right? We're creating an anaerobic environment, within the cell. We're creating disease opportunity and malfunction and slowdown of energy. We're
really
getting slowdown of energy.
What does that mean, Ken? So when you say we're creating oxidative stress,
you're creating disease. You're creating disease.
So sugar is coating the cells so they can't get the nutrients they need? Like, explain that in layman's terms.
So in layman's terms, what happens is when you have an overabundance of glucose, when you have too much sugar coming into the body, you create more of an anaerobic environment in the body. We cannot create as much energy because sugar will get in the way of some of the processes when there's too much to throw other things out of balance. Like we may throw off magnesium at a cellular level, which is part of over 1,000 different enzymatic processes in the body. So a lot of things depend on that nutrient, but sugar can interfere with the utilization and absorption of that particular mineral. It can also throw off how calcium is working in the body. So you've got people out here, running around grabbing K2 and vitamin D3 supplements, shoving them in, but they still haven't fixed the rest of the stuff, right? They're still down in all the other sugars. So that supplement probably isn't doing much, if anything, for them necessarily, right? So this is why it's very important to understand that it's not just a matter of filling a hole. There are relationships between things in the body that's a little more complicated than saying, hey, I have a pothole of vitamin D, let me pour some vitamin D in, or I know that vitamin D will synthesize better if I pour in some vitamin K2 and I get that in one supplement.
This is a good point.
But if you haven't changed the other things that are linked to the root cause of your deficiency in the first place,
you got a problem. So I want to make sure I'm hearing this. So I'm going to put it in Heather terms because Heatherisms seem to work well for me. So you've got something wrong. So you've got too much sugar, and that too much sugar is eating away at magnesium. So then you put magnesium on, but now you have an off balance in D. So then you put more D in. Now you have an off balance in calcium. So then you add more calcium in. Now you got an off balance in iron. So you add more iron. So you went, and this is the spiral that so many people go on. They're low on this, and then they're low on this, and then they're low on. It's a funnel going the wrong way. So instead of looking up here, because you're creating an onion effect at that point.
Oh yeah.
When you get to the very core, the original problem was the sugar. So what I've been learning with working with doctors and clinicians, and I'm so blessed to have people like you in my life, is that when you start going through the journey of health, don't worry about your supplementation first. Focus on how much water are you taking in?
Get the basics.
What kind of foods are you eating? How does your gut look? Because sugar affects your gut biome, correct?
Probably more so than anything else outside of stress itself.
So let's talk about how those two things correlate, because there's a lot of words being thrown around, and you said it earlier in our talk about probiotics and things like that.
Yeah.
So sugar, how does sugar feed the problems in our gut?
Well,
Like, I want to make sure.
It's so amazing because, you know, almost I think so much of our body loves sugar, including the bugs within us that are us, that are part of us, that are part of our various microbiomes, you know, throughout the body. We'll just, you know, center around the gut microbiome right now that love to grow and create problems. You know, they would create gut dysbiosis, which just means an imbalance of bacteria in the gut, create issues for you to where this could even lead down to pattern of creating an autoimmune disorder due to leaky gut. So sugar is an absolute contributor to leaky gut. It's not talked about enough, to be honest. We're talking about wheat all the time. And yes, wheat does manifest itself in the sugar, but we don't just kind of just go sugar itself, especially glucose form sugar, can absolutely lead to intestinal permeability. So what that means basically is once we get this, you know, the walls of our gut, right, should be like this. They should be very sealed. But over time, if things are getting in the gut and are maintaining there, it starts to create these gaps. And what's really interesting about that gap is, let's say this is your intestinal wall here. There's particles that start leaking through out of places they shouldn't. These items are never, these food particles and digestive materials should never leave this place in your body. They should just be absorbed at the right point when they were broken down enough to be released into the blood to then be picked up and used as nutrients at a cellular level. But if we have a breach in there, then food particles start leaking through here. Now this sends out a bunch of alerts to the immune system that we have a problem, because we have things that are in places they should not be. The first place that's right on outside of the intestinal wall is the lymphatic system, right? And so the lymphatic system is a tubular network that you would much like see like veins and arteries, but there's no blood in there. It's fluid, it's lymphatic fluid. And what that fluid is for is to move cellular waste. So we call the lymphatic system kind of like the sewer system of the body, because I like to look at every cell and think of them individually as like people, and people poop and pee, and cells poop and pee too. So their excretions go into the lymphatic system to then eventually make it down and out of the body. They, you know, things get filtered. There's no pump for the lymphatic system, so you need to move and groove. So a lot of times, think about cancer. Cancer is very much linked to the lymphatic system. If you look where your cancer is formed, breast cancer, what's in the breast? Tons of what? Lymph glands, lymph nodes, right? Tons come into there, right? But you've got lymph going all throughout your head. You know, you've probably felt these lymph glands swell up when you're feeling sick or something, and that's because they're going to work. They are actually dealing with the toxicity of the cells and some of the disease that's trying to, and the high acid that comes from that disease, and it's down regulating it so that it won't burn up your kidneys. So some things may come out of the cell at a pH balance of like 3%, which is very, very acidic. And the lymph gland will upregulate that so that by the time it hits your kidneys to be filtered, it will not damage the kidney, okay? So just from that permeability, right? So we're overeating sugar, wheat, and things like that. We create this leaky gut opportunity. That leaky gut opportunity creates this quote unquote autoimmune. Every autoimmune disorder has some of this involved. There is a leaky gut component.
Okay.
Always. Okay. So until you get that solved, you're going to continue to have the autoimmune, right? So maybe one of the autoimmune that you're having is Hashimoto's, right, with thyroid, and you haven't quite figured out the diet.
I know. What about celiac? Is how closely related to celiac is sugar issues?
They're correlated. They're absolutely correlated. You know, because you got to remember, what is celiac? Celiac is still, you know, we're looking at gluten, you know, quote unquote, but what are they delivered in? It's really hard to get gluten without sugar, you know?
All right.
So they are absolutely intertwined. And to try to treat them any other way is counterintuitive, and why people end up with these diseases for so very long and never solve them. So, you know, one of my things with working with diabetics, type 1s, type 2s, people with hypertension, cholesterol issues, whatever, is to help them solve it, right? And to solve it, you've got to solve the cue and the trigger that's created this chain of events that's got you so broken down in so many areas of your health, okay? So, you know, one of the ones that we were talking about before the show, right, about fungal infections, like, you know, so what loves sugar in the body? Bacteria, fungus, yeast love sugar, right? That's part of who we are. We can't get rid of it. But if we constantly feed, you know, if you've ever fermented anything, if you constantly feed, you know, a SCOBY or, you know, something in a brewing process more sugar, it loves it. That's the process of fermentation. It wants to, you know, eat that sugar. So in the body, you create the same environment. You know, you want to make beer in your body. Essentially, that's kind of what we're doing when we constantly add too much to create this overgrowth in the body, and it starts to manifest itself in so many different ways. It'll manifest itself in brain fog. It'll manifest itself in fungus, eczema, poor bowels that are swapping back and forth, UTIs, yeast infections. I mean, the list goes on. There's a lot of symptoms
But
that
we don't
come
notice it
from that
you know?
alone.
I think there's a lot of symptoms, and I know a lot of people listening to this or that will watch this in the future will say, well, every symptom leads to something. And you're absolutely right. Every symptom does lead to something, because our body only has so many freaking symptoms it can produce. Okay?
That's right.
It only has so many ways to tell you shit's wrong. That's the fact. So one thing I noticed, like, so there's a lot of men out there, like women, we know when we have yeast infections, okay? It's everyone, like the world thinks only women have yeast infections, but by the time your body has a yeast infection, you are pretty far
You're far gone.
But for men, they don't get it like we do. But what I'm finding is that men get fungus on their toes, or they'll have athlete's foot, or they'll have a rash under their arm, or they'll have a rash under their privates. So all of these things, they're not just rashes. This is not a
and they're not just these little things because you're getting older.
No.
Because everybody likes to use that. Oh, I'm getting a little old. My joints are a little more my joints are a little more crickety. So, right? So
but why are your joints
sugar and your joints felt better because you were no longer causing this this acidosis in the body where you're overly acidic, and it's causing you to pull more calcium out, right? And that's causing the strain on your joints.
I think, and that brings me back to a statement I made earlier, is that over time, we create this buildup. Think of it like a storage facility. You know, like you put all this stuff in, you take one box out. You put 5 boxes in, you take 1 box out. That's kind of what happens to our bodies over time. We put 5 boxes in, we burn up 1, you know, living, breathing, walking, whatever that is, growing, but we keep putting more in. And when I'm not saying more food, but we're putting more sugars that result in the insulin issues, yeast issues, things like that. So by the time, I think that's why so many of us, when we start reaching our late 30s, 40s, 50s, and so on, we start seeing a lot of these issues. It's not something we did in the past year. It's something we've done our whole lives that have now stored up. But just because you've been doing this your whole life doesn't mean you throw in the towel. Just like a storage shed, you can open the door and clean that shit out.
Well, you can absolutely, I mean, the body wants, I mean, it's something that we don't often remember is the body is always doing everything possible to operate its optimal potential, no matter how bad you're screwing it up. So it's constantly robbing Peter to pay Paul. If you don't put the proper nutrients in it, it will put something else in its place that looks close to it to create an enzyme, for example. So it's extremely complex and very intelligent machine that we have to where you don't feel it until you feel it sometimes.
Right.
Like you just hit the wall and there's no other resources. And so now you're broken. Now you've got a quote unquote disease, but it didn't just show up overnight. You've been degrading the machine year after year after year after year after year, day after day, right? Because you haven't, we are all just a living, breathing representation of our habits. So these habits have led you to where you are. You need to reverse it. And the body wants to reverse. Once you get those things out of the way, once the cells can operate at full potential because they have the things that they need and there's nothing else oversaturating it or getting out of balance, throwing other particular processes or nutrients off that allow those processes to happen in the first place, you'll get better. I mean, I work with people that are dealing with sugar and diabetes who are no longer diabetics within 60 days. 90 days sometimes, okay? It's about commitment and it's about addressing the problem, the real problem within you and getting things to repair, allowing things to repair, allowing the kidney that you beat up, you beat up your kidneys with those high blood sugar levels, right? You beat up your liver with those high blood sugar levels. You've collected a lot of fat and toxicity because of your high sugar levels. So there's so many things. You could get gout, You're always talking about meat and stuff with gout, gout, uric acid, high with sugar in the body, okay?
Interesting.
So these are all very commonplace diseases that we are the disease. We make our own diseases with the habits that we have 90% of the time. Ignorance is one thing, but at some point, you got to know that pizza is not the healthiest food that you can eat. Being in the midst of the what we're in right now in terms of trying to increase our immunity, but you're showing up to Krispy Kreme. I'm calling you out. It's all good. Just calling it what it is. You're showing up to Krispy Kreme with a mask on. What's up?
Getting your sugar.
Come on.
Getting your fix.
It's real. This is a real thing, and we just got to get real about it and stop playing with it. If you want to make a difference. If you don't want to make a difference, do whatever. Right? But for those people that are probably on this call, you're probably trying to figure out some things and you're probably starting to inspect your life a little bit right now during this conversation. Okay? And that's good. Take inventory. Look in your pantry. Go look and see all the sugar that you got in your pantry. Because if you have a very rich pantry and it's not a bunch of canned vegetables, okay, then I guarantee you probably 70% of it is sugar-based.
That's disturbing. So
right?
So we've got a couple takeaways from today, and we know one of them is going to be, like I said before, is replacement. So for most people, their biggest sugar cravings are happening morning and night. So I don't want to dismiss what happens in between, but for morning, think about some substitutes. I know we talked about stevia in its green form. So if stevia is white, like Ken said earlier, it is not something that you should, let's put it this way. If it's white, chances are it's sugar, period.
Yes.
It's not real. So stevia, monk fruit. What about agave? Do you have thoughts there?
Yeah, agave is, I've never touched agave simply because of how hard the process is to get it over to the source of sugar it is. And it's still sugar at the end of the day. All most people are looking for in terms of their sugar choice is to make them feel better about something, okay? So they're like, oh, I'm going with agave because it doesn't have as high of amount of sugar as another source. I'm going with coconut sugar because it has a lower glycemic index. Listen, it's still sugar.
It's still sugar, but it's a start. It's a start.
Yeah, it's
so
maple
I'm not gonna
syrup.
people for trying to find something else.
Honey, coconut sugar, agave nectar, agave sugar, molasses, you name it. Corn syrup, right? High fructose corn syrup, right? Really, really bad on the gut. And so a lot of us don't even realize that your sugar addiction has come from the intensity of the potency of the sugar substance you've been putting in your body in various foods for so many years, right? And something like high fructose corn syrup and a soda is way more addictive because of the potential is so much higher. Like hundreds of % more intensity than regular sugar in a similar volume. Hundreds, I can't remember offhand. It could be like 300-400% more impact on you from a sugar standpoint than regular white sugar could be. So we have to take all those into account, Heather, at the end of the day.
So, and then, so substituting some of that in the morning, just yes, they're different sugars, but they are lower. So you don't cut out sugar immediately, because you will have a crash, because your body is addicted. This isn't, when we talk about addiction in this sense, it's not necessarily a mental addiction, as we're talking about a body's physical response addiction. So keep that in mind. Substitution, fruit is a really good substitute. So consider that. And then during the day, a lot of the foods that we eat, if you can't get rid of all the sugars, right? You can't have sushi without rice. It's kind of impossible, but limit the amount of rice you take. So we're dealing with a couple different things. We're dealing with substitution. And when you can't substitute, we're dealing with quantity. How much of that thing are you eating? And then recommending journaling. Journaling is incredibly, even if you don't hand it to someone else, just looking at it yourself, understanding how your food is correlating with your feelings, it does make a huge, huge impact, and it's eye-opening. It'll uncover patterns. This call is not designed to have you change your life. It's designed to raise awareness of your patterns and the way things are affecting your body on a different level. So when you start keeping track of journaling and you realize, wow, I only ate 3 times and I wasn't hungry, then that 5-meal-a-day plan is not working for you. Or maybe you ate 3 meals a day and you're starving. Okay, maybe you need to break them into 5 smaller meals, but you're not going to know that unless you take the time to do the homework and analyze what's happening. We as people, we analyze everything. You know, we keep track of our checkbooks and our money. Think of your food as the money for your body. If you can balance your checkbook, balance your food journal, because it's money for your body. And if you can start changing your thought process around the way you modify food. Food, you need food to survive, but the way we as Americans eat food is quite excessive. So if you can,
Heather, I wanted to cover 2 more things before we get out of here, because
I'm not going to wrap up. I'm just kind of giving some notes, just letting people know that this is why this is so important. You got to balance your food like you balance your checkbook. So what were the other things you needed to add, Ken?
So you mentioned that this is physical, right? But it is absolutely mental as well.
Oh, it's both. It's definitely both.
It is absolutely directly connected. You can't escape it. Any place in the brain that is that loves coke, heroin, that happy place, right? This goes to those same receptors. And so part of getting better with sugar is healing those receptors, which means you have to absolutely take a break, right? You need to get control. For some people, it might be really bad. Everybody's not the same in terms of their level of addiction to sugar, just like not everybody's the same as to their level of addiction with alcohol, for example. So some people can have 1 beer or a couple of shots and they're fine and they can go on with their day and their night. Some people can have 1 beer and they need to drink the entire bar. So the same thing happens with sugar. I see this with clients all the time who come in on various levels of sugar addiction. And some of them, we can bring some sweet things in that they can have here and there that are natural. Others can't. They absolutely have to abstain because they lose absolute control. They don't have control. There are some of you out there that might be hard to hear, but it's a very real thing that you are or could be a diehard 10 on the scale of a super addicted sugar person, and that when you have one, you will snowball for the next 2, 3, 4, 6, 8 weeks until you, okay, I got to pull my stuff back together again, right? And then you're starting back over from the beginning. So you got to realize that this is a very real problem that some of you might have, and you need to treat it as such. You know, to remove the judgment from looking at someone out there who might be hooked on crack or heroin or whatever, and you're a scale 10 on sugar. You have a problem too, okay? So you got to get there in terms of how we deal with that. You know, we got to get there.
Yeah.
Because if we don't, this is how this became such a big problem in our world. It's because it's not looked at as a problem. No one's treating it as a problem. No one's looking at it and diminishing it, going, wow, my kids are eating all this stuff all day long. They're blowing up like a house, but you know, we just big people in our family, right? We hear that crap all the time. So I'm just trying to get the real thing out there. You guys know I'm a straight shooter when it comes to this. I'm very direct. But the brain, excessive sugar consumption has the power to change the brain's reward system because of how much dopamine is being released. And
That's
so,
a great way to put it, Ken. That's a great way to put it. It changes, and I think, and you're right. We as society, we when we think of addiction, we think of coke, crack, meds. We don't think of this as an addiction, but the reality is, it is, and it's not. When people say there's a food addiction, it's not necessarily the food. It's this underlying tone of, it's like this undertow of the sugar craving. So I think we need to stop judging, okay? That's not our place to judge. Just take a deep dive inward and figure out what that feels like and how you're dealing with all this. I think right now more than ever, we're going to see a lot of patterns of people suffering from varying levels of addiction, whether that's a substance abuse or sugar, which is also a substance, or a food addiction, if you will, because of what we've been experiencing with the COVID stuff. So it'll be very hard. So I hope more and more people watch the recorded call of this, because I think it's really important for people to understand you're not alone. Every single person is going through this. There's not a human on earth, child or adult, that does not suffer from an influx of sugar. It is not your fault. It has a lot to do with the way our foods are processed today and the way we have a relationship with food in today's society. We're not hunters and gatherers like we used to be. We go to Harris Teeter, we go to Dominic's, we go to Jewel, we go to Publix, we go to Whole Foods, we go to all these stores to obtain food. It's right there for us. But when we had to hunt and gather, there were no processed foods. And I mean, you have to realize that that's the world we currently live in. Nobody grows their own chickens anymore and kills them in their backyard and eats them. Instead, I mean, and no, okay, I shouldn't say nobody. 99.9% of America, okay, does not do that. So what people don't realize is that chicken that you just bought from the store, even though it's organic, it has been injected with water, sugar water, essentially, to keep that chicken's cellular wall intact for when you eat it. So just be conscious the minute you become aware of where these sugars are coming from, and that's where the journaling comes in. You can start tracing the lines and trying to figure out how to combat this in your life. Am I off balance here, Ken?
No, not at all. And one of the best points about what you're saying that you're relating to is palate, right? So the best part about going hardcore, no sugar for a long period of time, once you're able to work up to it and just breaking the bank on sugar and just say like, I'm out, is your palate will come back into a protective zone, right? It's like bringing back your defense mechanisms. They start to light up again and go, ooh, that's really too sweet. Something that you might have been able to pound, 90 days ago and take multiple servings of, you might only be able to get a teaspoon of it, like just a little sliver of that cake or a piece of that pie. And you go, whoa, that's really, really sweet, right? And that's good. This is what you want to come back, but that will take some time to develop. Your natural senses will come back to where you're like, you pick up a Coke and you're like, whoa, man, that's a lot of sugar. That's really too sweet for me to take. And as long as you keep adhering to those, you'll be able to stay in a safe zone, right? It's when we go back to an old habit and we don't listen to the defense mechanisms initially that go, that's too much, I need to stop. And we kind of force ourselves through it, kind of like smoking cigarettes for the first time.
Oh, I was just about to say that. It's like smoking.
Nobody likes the way cigarettes taste when you smoke a cigarette, but somehow you push through it. Next thing you know, you're smoking a pack a day, right? So you got to think, just kind of think of those things. And I know we covered a lot here tonight, and I'll just love, today, how the conversation was. Heather, you're always a great host and really allow us to do a lot of dynamic talking, and we had some great questions too. But go to this website and get the guide. Okay, so I have a not so sweet sugar guide. Okay, it's newbillofhealth.net. newbillofhealth.net / not so sweet. newbillofhealth.net / not so sweet. And that will take you, just drop your information in there. You'll get the guide as soon as you put it in there. It's a 25-page document and really goes into more detail on some of the things that we've discussed here today. All right.
And
And,
we'll
you
put
know,
that
leverage
link
that,
up on
share it
our
with your
Facebook
friends, your
page.
family, have a discussion about it, especially
Yeah.
if you're a family. Go take inventory of your world. Go to the pantry, start flipping everything over and use this guide, because in that guide, there's about 70 or 80 terms for various types of sugar. So you can start to see everywhere it is. If you've never done this exercise, this is a great exercise to do, and then go into your refrigerator and do the same thing. Start identifying all of the places that you're bringing in processed sugars first. Then you can start looking at how much natural sugar you're bringing in and figure out how to discern your relationship with those things based on how you're feeling, what type of ailments you're trying to fix. So even some of the ailments that we talked about will be mentioned here and the detriment that they're doing. Like for ladies, you don't want to age, stop eating so much sugar. Sugar really causes people to age fast, okay? It breaks down some telomeres at a cellular level that speed up the process of aging. Insulin spike speeds up the process of aging at a cellular level. So it may seem sweet, but if you want to still, you know, you look at some of the older people that you're like, man, how do they look so well for so long? I guarantee you they're probably not pounding sugar.
So stay off the sweet tea, Southerners.
Ooh, that's hard, girl. You're going to get shot. You got to be careful.
I know.
Careful, careful.
But it's unfortunately, that's a big staple down here in the South.
It is.
You know, I'm from Chicago. We don't drink sweet tea. We don't.
No.
We don't even know what sweet tea is.
That's a shame, because it is so good.
It is delicious, but it's also one of those. And just for everyone watching, we're not saying don't ever have sugar again. Okay, just let me make that really, really clear.
Right.
I love chocolate. I love chocolate like Oprah loves bread. I love chocolate, and I'm not going to stop eating it, but I'm much more conscious. And since I started going through my sugar elimination journey, I used to eat, you know, those organic chocolate bars. They're like this. They're like as big as a cell phone. No problem. The whole thing. Don't ask me for a bite.
You're not alone. That's normal. That's normal.
But now, since I've been going through this journey myself personally, I can have like 2 squares, and then I'm like, whoa, this is too much. It's too much. So
What?
Your body does start to change, and you're not omitting sweet things. You're just getting them back in check again. That's all it is. It's just getting sweets back in check. And sometimes you just have to do it with a hard, you know, like when your internet crashes, you don't just sit there and patiently wait for it to come back on. You unplug it. You unplug it from the wall, you wait 30 seconds, you plug it back in, you screw it back in. We do a hard reboot, and then we continue to use our internet. So your body's the same way. If you can commit to doing a hard reboot for a month, you can go back to eating, but your palate will change, so you're not going to be craving as much. Okay? And
hey, Heather, can we do something real quick? If anybody on this call, or after the fact, if you're watching this later, if you would like to do some level of a sugar reboot, put sugar in a comment, like sugar reboot in the comment. I'll reach out to you, and maybe if I have enough people, I will orchestrate a group sugar reboot thing that we can all do together. Okay? Because I can walk you through some very useful tools and techniques to help manage the sugar addictions that you're trying to break, or to put back in balance, to help you not have as many detox symptoms or just feel like garbage the whole time. And then also create a bit of a group community to be able to share the experience with, that we can also do a little deeper education along the process. So if that's something that you want to do, I have a program, and we can do this. This is something that I want to offer as an option, for sure.
So this call is going to be rebroadcast on our Facebook page, because I have been informed that the live stream of this on Facebook was canceled. Facebook doesn't like live streaming Zoom calls. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a watch party and re-air this. So for those of you that aren't watching the Zoom live and you're watching this on the rewatch, that's totally okay. Anyone that puts in the sugar reboot in the comments or messages me directly with the term sugar reboot through the store, or messages Ken through New Bill of Health through Sugar Reboot, we will gather your information, add you to that group, and just help you get started. Again, we're trying to create, when Ken and I have these talks, we're trying to give you life-changing tools in really small bites that are actually attainable for you. So no level of your change is right or wrong. You got to meet yourself where you are. We're just giving you multiple strategies to do so.
Absolutely. And don't forget the guide. If you haven't downloaded the guide, go download it. It'll be a good read, and it's a good reference, a little piece of reference that you can share. It's something tangible that you can put in your hands if you print it off, and just keep it.
We'll put that in the notes as well. So real quick, it's to get that guide one more time, guys, go to newbillofhealth.net, and you're going to go /not-so-sweet. And you'll be able to get that guide. If you have problems at any time finding the guide, or you can't get to that site, again, just message Get Me Some Green or message New Bill of Health, and we'll make sure that we can get that to you right away.
Sounds good.
That's a wrap. Thank you so much for everyone dialing in. We really appreciate you. Look forward to next month. I'm not sure what our coffee talk will be next month. I'm still working on it. Perhaps we'll have Ken back to talk about something else, because he's so valuable and it's such a great community. All of our coffee talks take place on the third Saturday of every month at 9 o'clock, and we will continue to do Zoom calls. They're always recorded, so if you miss it, you can catch it on our Facebook channel, you can catch it on YouTube, and oftentimes Ken will repost them on his site as well when he's the speaker.
Yes.
So
sure.
Thank you very much, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Ken, thank you again.
Take care, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.